Benefactor underwriting for this broadcast has been provided by a grant from Republic Bank. The power of red is back. Major underwriting support for this broadcast has been provided by grants from New York Community Bank, M&T Bank, Perfect Building Maintenance, Customers Bank, Collins Building Services, Marks Paneth. Additional underwriting support has been provided by grants from AmTrust Title, Bank of America, Capital One Bank, Douglaston Development Levine Builders, Flushing Bank, Friedman LLP, Handro Properties LLC, Handler Real Estate Organization, Investors Bank, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Institute at Syracuse University, John Catsimatidis Red Apple Group, New Banks, Meridian Capital Group, Ocean First Bank, RPW Group, TD Bank, the One Stop Property Group, and these friends. Can you make money in real estate? I don't know the answer. Do you buy properties in the suburbs? Do you get involved with opportunity zones? Do you get involved with Times Square? What about the taxes? I don't really know the answer. So today I've assembled this group of leading real estate professionals to provide the insight on those questions. What are the opportunities and the challenges in the future? My guests include Alyssa Marcus, who is a vice president at Jamestown LP. The father of Alyssa Marcus, a good friend of mine, Joel Marcus, who is the senior partner at Marcus & Pollock. And last but not least, the principal of Hildreth Real Estate Advisors, David Shorenstein. So Alyssa, since you are the newbie, as we would say, this is your first time that you've been on the Stoller Report. Joel's been on the show, David's been on the show in the past. Let's talk about the project you're working on today, which is a dynamic project in Times Square.
Sure. So I'm working right now as the asset manager and in development on One Times Square, which is a very famous building right at the base of the bow tie on 42nd Street between 7th Avenue and Broadway. And in a sense, everybody knows this building. Everyone's watched the New Year's Eve ball drop at some point. They probably have a picture in front of the building, but they don't really know much about the history of the building, and there's a lot of really rich history. For example, people don't know that Times Square was actually named after this building because the New York Times built it. It was the first capital investment in Uptown at the time in 1904, and they renamed Longacre Square Times Square in its honor. When they opened the building, they set off fireworks on December 31st, 1904, and that was the original genesis for the ball drop event, which began then in 1907. There's just a lot more history where that came from, but interestingly, the building has never been open to the public in any way. It's sat vacant for decades, and Jamestown feels it's our responsibility, especially as a developer who specializes in adaptive reuse, to invite the public into this building in a meaningful way, tell everyone about its rich history, but also bring it into the future through emerging technologies, storytelling, and a bunch of new experiences that we're programming for the building.
They know of the building because of New Year's Eve and everything, but as you said, most of the property has sat dormant inside. It's been an advertising space. Let's talk about what you're planning to do with the observation deck and some of the experience retail as opposed to regular retail and the museum and so on.
Right. So we will have a museum and viewing deck experience from the 16th to the 19th floors, which will be accessible by 2 exterior glass elevators on the outside of the building. And the point of the museum is really to use technology and creative storytelling to explain the history of the building. And then the experience will culminate on the 19th floor observation deck, which actually cantilevers over outside of the building's footprint over the sidewalk and will give visitors a great view of Times Square and an up-close view of the New Year's Eve ball and numerals. And then the other experience that we're discussing is called Next Gen, from floors 14 to 3. It's aptly named because it really is the next generation of advertising, as we're bringing, super brands that either currently advertise on our signs or have retail shops in Times Square or want a Times Square presence into the building to interact with their consumers in a new way. So for brands, it's a great way to get to know their consumer and have a one-to-one, personal connection. And then for visitors, it's about amusement, games, and fun, really.
But it doesn't have the traditional retail is not there.
We are not selling any goods in the building. We might have a point of sale through RFID bracelets where you can purchase things, but we won't actually be holding any inventory and selling.
So here's a perfect question for your father over there. You're working on the project.
Yes.
Okay, let's talk about what you're doing over there. And the city in the past has always provided certain incentives in different areas, the same way as David has, in the Opportunity Zone in Riverhead and so on, which we'll talk about in a second. Let's talk about what type of tax incentives are Jamestown going to get from the city to do this major work, which only helps and enhances Times Square's.
Because this is rehabilitation of an existing commercial building, they're eligible by right. There's a specific statute. It's called the ICAP, Industrial and Commercial Abatement Program, and increases in the property tax during this project will be subject to a tax abatement. And it's a 10-year tax abatement, so it's quite substantial.
Full tax abatement or a phase-in on the tax abatement?
Assessments will be phased in, but since a lot of the increase will be construction and rehabilitation, it's not going to be phased in. But a big part of the increase, perhaps 85%, would be subject to a tax abatement. So they get about 4 years to do the project. At the end of 4 years, whatever the increase is, about 85% of the increase will be abated for 10 years, 5 years, 100%, and then the next 5 years it phases out. So the good thing about incentive and abatement programs is it allows developers to put a lot of capital into a project, and they may not receive the return they're looking for until a few years down the road.
Okay, so in the similar manner, okay, and this relates to a building directly across the street from 1 Times Square, is 3 Times Square, which is owned by the Reuters and the Rudin family. And they are basically taking, Touro University now, not Touro College, they've changed. They're taking, are they subject, since they're a nonprofit, what are their taxes on that situation?
That's a different story because they're part of the Times Square redevelopment, and the land is owned by the City of New York, and they have a different tax abatement that was done as an incentive to redevelop Times Square. But that tax abatement is going to phase out. But at the moment, the property does not pay any real estate taxes.
Okay, and it probably won't pay real estate taxes because the nonprofit is taking over most of the building.
That's true.
So
That's
they're
true.
signing a 30-year lease.
That's right.
And separating this as a separate condominium, so they won't be paying taxes.
That's because the tax law, a not-for-profit can have a full tax exemption, but they have to own the property. But the city is permitting a leasehold condominium. So if there's a condominium for a 30-year or greater period of time, they consider that the same as owning real estate. And therefore, the owner of that condominium, which would be Touro, would receive a full tax exemption.
Which is taking place quite a bit throughout the city by NYU and other places. NYU has opened up medical centers all over on 41st Street, 38th Street, okay, where they basically have a condominium ownership for many years, so they have that opportunity of not.
That's a pretty important exception to the rule to allow them to do this, because if they went into a building that was partially occupied by tax-paying entities, In the past, and I'm going back maybe about 20 years, it would have been taxable. So the amount of rent that they would pay plus the override for taxes almost double the amount they'd have to pay.
So now I'm going to phase that question. You've been buying properties over the last number of properties over there. Isn't it hard to buy properties to make sense, okay, with regard to, you know, fair market rentals of apartments, with regard to retail? What are you buying, and what do you feel comfortable about buying in New York City? Then we'll get to Riverhead in a second.
Sure. Well, New York City, as we know, is probably the most competitive marketplace to buy properties. You have constantly brokers calling owners, principals like myself calling owners, trying to get a deal. So the sellers, you know, sometimes have a distorted view of their value. That's the first thing. And we've seen at the same time rents, apartment rents going through the roof. No one can really explain why, when everyone was supposed to be fleeing the city.
Each and every year, people graduate college, and they all want to come to the Big Apple.
That's right. And you had the rent-regulated buildings, which most people don't want to purchase, and you can't add value to those types of buildings, so it really bumped up the prices and the value of the free market rents and the free market buildings. So we bought 9 buildings in the last 2 years, all in Manhattan, but those buildings that we bought, the same building now is probably 30–40% more, so we can't really make sense of it. So our buying activity has really slowed down. You know, not seeing the same type of deals, same type of buildings that had the vacant retail or the distress that we saw throughout COVID.
Now, what's happening with retail in general?
I mean, we're seeing on like the main thoroughfares on the avenues, you know, there's activity. I mean, prices are definitely nowhere clear where the peak was. Especially on the smaller spaces are renting, especially buildings that might have had a restaurant in it. So we look for buildings that previously had the infrastructure of a restaurant. Those usually get activity and rent very well. But if we don't even look at side street retail that was not in a restaurant, I just don't have any belief that that's coming back anytime soon.
Okay, two questions. Would you explain the opportunity zone concept, okay, and what you're doing in Riverhead?
Sure. So Riverhead is a very interesting area. There's been a lot of talk over the years about redeveloping this whole area. Apollo was trying to do it back in the 90s, actually. There's a long history. So I actually came across Riverhead by accident when I had to stop, when I stopped buying in New York City, but started buying workforce retail buildings in Riverhead, like small neighborhood shopping centers, and then discovered it was an opportunity zone, started with one building, redeveloped that building, and that one building was our first opportunity zone. It had a restaurant and then a couple apartments upstairs. Very large restaurant. It was like 4,000 square foot, so hence it was a former restaurant, could turn that into a similar type of use, and then just started really going after every single building on the main street, which was all an opportunity zone, and ended up, I think we bought over almost 25 buildings now, up and down the main street, right near where there's already an aquarium, there's hotels. RXR now just got awarded a major project there. So the big developers have been there, and now they're really coming in.
Now, for an investor, what are the benefits for the opportunity zone?
So opportunity zones are not for every investor. You know, it's a long-term horizon, and they have to have some sort of capital gain, whether they sold a business or a building and didn't want to do a 1031. You know, they are able to defer their gain for a certain number of years.
Okay. Alyssa, tell me about how is it to work with your father?
We've actually worked together on a couple deals. Back in 2018, we both worked on the Jamestown sale of Chelsea Market to Google, which was definitely an exciting one. And then more recently, we've both been working on One Times Square, obviously, as we talked about with the ICAP. And a funny story is, I don't go around advertising that he's my dad, because that's just, you know, maybe it's a bit tacky at times.
He does. I'm proud of you.
Very proud.
So when we were in the process of closing our construction loan with JP Morgan recently, we were on a due diligence call, and we needed a tax opinion from Marcus & Pollock. And you know, all the guys at JP Morgan were all fighting over who was going to be the one who got to call Joel, arguing like, oh, I'm closer with him, I'm closer with him. I was like, okay, I'm just not going to even mention that. I'm going to see him at dinner tonight. I'll just leave that out. But yeah, we've worked together on a few deals, and I'm sure there'll be more.
Let's bring up another topic, which definitely the 421As, okay, or the affordable New York, which David was alluding, with the fair market and the rents stabilized apartments. What's your thoughts of what's going to happen?
Well, as of June 15th, the program is over. So anybody who is not...
It's definitely over, right?
It's definitely, well, you never say never.
Right.
But the state legislature is hostile to 421A, and the city council is hostile to it. So it expires on June 15th, and there's no renewal. There's not even a proposal that's out there.
So how are we going to have development? I mean, it's going to be good for David because there's going to be limitations on the amount of nothing new coming on the market and, supply and demand situation.
It's going to limit new construction of housing, particularly affordable housing. And the real tension here is that the legislature wants 50% or more of the building, even 100% of the building, to be, rent stabilized and with affordable income levels, and the numbers just don't work out. You can't develop a building unless you have 80-20 was good, 70-30 could work, 50-50 not so much, and
Right.
They don't realize how, and the cost of materials, the cost to get the land, and the limitations on rent increases. There's a finite one. Even market rents is a finite level, so these numbers are not working. And the legislature wants more. They want the affordable housing, but they're not willing to let the developers make a profit.
A lot of people are leaving New York in a different manner, leaving New York for investment purposes. Have you also decided to do some investments out of the tri-state area?
I started buying some investments in Los Angeles. This was in about 2017, 2018, a number of multifamily buildings, and did well with that. Stopped when COVID happened because I focused on Manhattan because I thought that was a tremendous opportunity, which it was. And over the past few years, I bought some workforce retail buildings in Los Angeles. So I'm a big believer in the workforce retail, the neighborhood centers, the bagel stores, the pizza, the restaurants, especially if they have restaurants. Things are not affected by the internet. So those are the types of buildings that I bought in Los Angeles and Suffolk County and out near Riverhead.
Okay, you've also bought in the Hamptons because the Hamptons is becoming more of a 24/7, 12 months a year as opposed to, what have you bought out there?
Really bought a number of buildings in Sag Harbor where I spend a lot of time. I put in Love Shack Fancy as a tenant, which is a major national brand. So it's almost like buying a building on Madison Avenue, I call it, because
Right.
You're getting those types of retailers that want to be out there. They take the spaces all year. I bought another building in the heart of Amagansett on 136 Main Street also. Just got a national children's clothing store in there. So, and these rents are higher than a lot of Manhattan streets. You cannot develop
Right.
in the Hamptons. So there's a finite amount of spaces, a finite amount of product. As we know, it's really an extension of Manhattan, and there's people that are there that I've met from all over the world that are there full time now. I don't know how they got there, but they're, whether they're from Australia, Italy, they're there, and there's a lot of money to spend there.
You brought up Chelsea Market. For my audience, tell me a little bit about what Jamestown did at Chelsea Market.
Jamestown did a lot of improvements to the food hall. They're still very active in the management and leasing of the food hall. We also built the Chelsea Local, which is the extension of that. It's below grade, which is geared towards more of a local shopping, like grocery shopping experience versus the more touristy main level. And we made improvements to the office as well. Of course, now we sold that to Google, and that was a really successful sale.
Now, you're following up in Times Square with something which is at Chelsea Market now, the interactive, like the Van Gogh exhibit, okay?
Oh, Art Tech House.
Yes, the Art Tech House.
Yes.
And you're planning to do that in Times Square, or similar type?
I wouldn't say it's similar, except that it is also going to use, you know, immersive technologies, and you know, will be visually exciting. But the next gen experience is really more about all different types of engagement. Some of them might be, you know, visual engagements, VR, AR, virtual host, and we're also exploring the metaverses a lot. We have 2 metaverses right now.
For my audience, explain what a metaverse is.
Metaverse is almost like an alternate reality in a video game. So we're you know, we're placemakers in the physical world, but we're also trying to make these, like, our buildings have a place in the digital world too. So in these metaverses, you can actually be in Times Square or be at the building and experience it in sort of like a video game type way. You know, with One Times Square, we're really trying to reimagine how buildings can be experienced. So connecting physical to digital.
Is New York City user-friendly, as one would say? Or as I hear from David, it sounds like they're not user-friendly in certain ways. Okay.
Well, there are certain incentives that the city put together. For example, the Hudson Yards, which had the UTEP, and they get tremendous tax abatements. Of course,
Explain that.
there were like 3 zones in the Hudson Yards, and the first developers to come in with 1 million square feet or more received tremendous tax incentives. And then as it got built out, the
They
incentives
reduced the
were
incentive.
less, but they're still very substantial. And so we've worked with the Related Company, we've worked with Brookfield, we have a project with Moynihan, Boston Properties. We just finished the Cove property, 441 9th Avenue, and these are a mixture of mostly the UTEP incentive for the Hudson Yards, and some of them are ICAP. But it has created a tremendous new nucleus, and a lot of office and residential been very attracted to this area. The office has been fabulously successful. The residential also. The retail, not so much, because Neiman Marcus went dark, and that's a challenge.
And that was the major tenant, and you know, people were looking for Neiman Marcus. So here's a question which two of you will answer. You bought the former Palm Restaurant at 838 Second Avenue. Okay, and the property was converted to hotel, and then you converted it to residential apartments.
The one that was a hotel was across the street. It was
Okay.
different. Ours was a building that was owned by the Palm.
Right.
It was a public company, owned by a public company, and it was just sitting there vacant. The apartments were just unrenovated. This was right in the middle of COVID, and you know, no one knew if the restaurant was ever going to be re-rented. It was left in shambles,
Right.
and the apartments were worse. And it was really just one other person that were going after the building, and we had to close in a week, and that's what got the deal.
So here's a question which I'd like any of you to answer. You know, there is the thought of converting hotels to residential apartments. That's one idea. The second idea is converting C&D office properties to apartments. If you don't have that tax abatement, how could you convert?
I think that's the obviously are zoning questions in converting them. There's no program for commercial to residential, and so that's a problem. And also, when you change from commercial to residential, there's about a 16 to 18% increase by the tax rate alone, and so it's really it's very expensive in terms of the tax burden, and so that's a problem with converting it. And then converting hotels to residential, same problem as office building to residential. There's no program out there. The J51 doesn't exist anymore. The 421G doesn't exist. That would have been a good program for the conversion, and because a lot of these buildings have finished their useful life as an office building or finished their useful life as a hotel. There was some talk, some of the hotels, the older hotels, I think the Affinia Group, they were looking at making them assisted living You know, I think there was a sale recently. We looked at it for another developer, but I don't know what's going to happen to those. But they just don't work as hotels.
So since you're a kid, where do you see the opportunities for you and your investors?
I see a lot of opportunity in Suffolk County where there's
Lower taxes,
lower taxes,
friendly government.
friendly government. They some of these towns actually encourage development
Right.
and want to make it life a little easier. And you see rents growing up. They're going up, and people want to live there. They can still commute into the city. You know, they're close to the beach. You know, it's a nice lifestyle.
Yeah,
so.
the commute may be a little tough. And you, where do you think the opportunities are?
I think that the money will go to the incentives. You know, if the government encourages development and provides incentives, the money will go there because it's just too big a lift to take a property, renovate it, improve it, bring in tenants before you make any kind of a return. And if the government doesn't give you 4 or 5 year minimum break on taxes, you can't do it.
So I'm looking at my crystal apples and I'm saying, are you shiny or dull? Listening to the conversation, they're not bright, but they are shining. And hopefully that things will get better. And I'd like to thank Alyssa, Joel, and David, and I'll see you next week.